Hey everyone, welcome to Served. Back in here for the Tuesday pod release. Hope you enjoyed T2 over the weekend. If you checked it out, this is where we normally do Racket Roundup, right? Where we talk about the results, the winners, the finalists, the different storylines. But when we have a 10 or 11-day tournament in Indian Wells and most of the Master Series events, there aren't a lot of tournament winners. You can't win the tournament in the first weekend of an 11-day tournament. But I can't get this thing out of my head that there's a bunch of babies walking around Indian Wells going, your mom's in the third round. Like there's your mama jokes there somewhere, but it is to celebrate the successes of Angie Kerber coming back and beating Ostapenko and looking like a version of the Angie Kerber of old. Caroline Wozniacki making, a comeback from having kids look normal. We were lucky enough to talk to Kim Clijsters during one of our first 3 episodes, and she kind of set the precedent, and now it's normal. Svitolina coming back, dealing with what's going on with family in Ukraine, having a baby, coming back and playing high-level tennis, making the semis at Wimbledon, playing well at Indian Wells again. I'm just blown away, and I'm going to tell you something right now. You guys can take this to the bank. My first kind of big prediction, because I hate prediction shows, but Naomi Osaka, from what I've seen, and however Indian Wells shakes out, she wins, she loses, whatever it happens, I'm telling you, she's going to win something big again. She is striking the ball. She is getting into tennis shape. She seems motivated. She seems like when she kind of left the game and was having, the mental issues that drove her away before, she decided to have a child. She looked like it was tough to be out there. The paces were tough. I'm telling you, Osaka is striking the ball, still not perfect, still making some errors. Serve is coming and going a little bit, but Naomi Osaka is going to win something big again. That's what I think. Azarenka playing well. Taylor Townsend still playing well. And if I was smarter, I would be able to come up with a your mama joke that the various 6-month to 3-year-olds are walking around saying, celebrating their mother's successes. We have a hell of a conversation with Brad Gilbert coming up that we recorded a couple of days ago in time for the Sunday release of T2. If you have not heard this yet, please listen to the full version. We did more than an hour with Brad. It was fantastic. I loved it. We exercise some personal demons also with each other. We've gotten to a place where we have a really good, healthy relationship now. Wasn't the case when we first broke up, and I think it all comes around again. Tennis is one big family, and I'm certainly thankful for Brad's time. But let's get to Jon Wertheim. Jon, welcome in. Before we get into the biggest stories of the week, there is something that happened which is maybe under the radar for like mainstream tennis media, but you wanted to take a second and talk about Stevie Johnson.
Do you remember when Farrah Fawcett died? You probably don't, because it also happened on the same day as Michael Jackson. It got buried. We have the same thing this week. Stevie Johnson announced his retirement. Not a huge surprise, but still, unfortunately, it happened for him anyway. The same day Simona Halep was effectively reinstated and Rafael Nadal pulled out of Indian Wells. So I'm not sure it got quite as much attention as it should. Stevie Johnson, one of the all-time, perhaps the greatest men's college tennis player of all time at USC. And for more than a decade, just one of these pros that adds to the cast. Nobody had anything but complimentary things to say about him. Good guy, good with the media, good with his colleagues. Tennis will miss him. It was a hell of a career, and we have to acknowledge that.
Yeah, and he's one of the guys where I wish I would have actually spent more time on tour. We kind of only overlapped for about 18 months because he stayed in college. He was a practice partner on the Davis Cup team in 2011, I think, when we played in Austin, and so we were only on tour together for a year or so. But listen, I say this about Kim Clijsters a lot also, but if you kind of have a problem with Stevie, I kind of tend to blame you. So listen, I hope the long sunset of life is everything you wish it to be. Stevie Johnson, you certainly made an impact on the game, but I think past that, I think you made an impact on people. So I hope the afterlife is great for you. And listen, I don't know that anyone in tennis will ever have a better stash than Stevie Johnson.
Bonus points.
The biggest story of, well, I guess it's the biggest story of the week, or the, macro view anyways. Rafa pulling out of Palm Springs after having pulled out of Australia, after having pulled out of Doha. I was in Vegas, was able to see him play the exhibition Netflix Slam with Carlos Alcaraz. It's not as if he pitched up to Vegas all of a sudden. He was in Palm Springs for a week before that, not because he cared about playing in an exhibition. It's because he cared about playing in Palm Springs. Got there, was getting used to the surface, trying to go through his paces properly. And listen, because he played in EXO doesn't mean he's ready to go. Does it matter to Rafa Nadal? Is he going to go rip his body apart if his goal is to win one match at Indian Wells? No. Every single decision that he has from this point forward, and probably for the last year and a half, maybe that's a slight stretch, but 15 months, has been let's work backwards from the possibility of playing Roland Garros. That didn't work out last year. We didn't see him until the new year started. He wanted to go down to January, get some match reps in. Not because he thought he could win the Australian Open. Great if he finds something, but because he wants to work backwards from the French Open. So yes, is it in an EXO? It is very different. Even Alcaraz with an ankle injury, when he was kind of running through, he would get drop shots hit on him and he would run through them, as opposed to doing the acrobatic slide stop, hit the skids, run back in and do that electro thing. He was kind of running through on the forehand side. That doesn't mean it's not entertaining. So there's a big difference between these guys put on a great show in Vegas. They did everything they had to do to make that entertaining, but that is very different than going through the best players on earth on a stickier surface, right? It's a different surface than there was in Vegas with altitude, yada, yada, yada. So listen, because you can play two sets against someone you're friendly with, when you know that they're compromised too, doesn't mean they're not apples to apples. And I think it's dumb to treat it that way. Obviously, if Rafa gets the benefit of the doubt, if he would have been healthy, he didn't come over just for an exhibition. He has proven that he gets the benefit. He's not going to say, I'm going to play Indian Wells if he's not. It would have been a perfectly acceptable explanation to say, hey, listen, I don't know that I can play 6 or 7 matches on a gritty hardcourt surface right now, but I can play a couple sets indoors, and I look forward to playing the Netflix Slam. No one would have cared. It would have been like, oh, that's rational. So I don't know why all of a sudden we're up in arms about that now. As we project forward, I want your take on, because I know how Rafa was in the locker room. It feels like he never had a bad day, right? And even if he was having a bad day, it never got in the way of him being cordial, respectful. There are a lot of, kind of tour guys who aren't nearly as good as Rafa, who, I said this about Roger too back in the day, but, they'll switch their grip tapes out, regrip, and they'll leave something on the floor and just walk away, right? And it's it drives me absolutely crazy. They'll get a stretch from a trainer and get up and not say thank you and walk out. It just drives me crazy. And it's been nice in tennis that two of your, top 3 stewards, including Novak, and Novak actually is very, he doesn't get enough credit for how friendly he is with people in and around the locker room as well. But it's nice to see that those guys reset the table on, hey, listen, I am one of the best players of all time. I am the favorite, one of the favorites every time I walk into a locker room, but there's also common courtesy involved with the way that I go day to day. How was he viewed, digested, received from your seat with the media?
Oh my God. Well, not even just the media. No, I totally agree. And I'll give you 2 of my favorite stories. One of them is in Australia a few years ago. You always like to chat up the drivers, and sometimes they have good gossip. And I said, just all the years you've been doing this, who are the nicest guys you've dealt with? And the driver said, oh, I'd probably say Nadal and then Federer. Nadal and Federer, yeah. And I said, okay, what? Not the stars. I mean, anyone. No. I'm talking about anyone. Those were the 2 guys who were most courteous, and asked them where they were from. Another favorite one was, I was supposed to talk to Nadal in 2008. He wins Wimbledon, remember, comes to the U.S. Open, and he's in the locker room, and this back when the locker room was open. Wimbledon champion, hottest thing in tennis, ranked number 1. I think he'd won the gold in China at the Olympics. I mean, this guy owns the world, and he's in the middle of talking to me. He says, hold on. He sprints out the door. He's topless, and he sprints to the practice court. What the hell is going on here? He had practiced before talking to me. We had this appointment to speak, and he had forgotten he had left one of his bottles on the court. So sits down, realizes he's left the bottle there, goes running out, grabs his bottle, throws it away, and then comes back and says, "Sorry, where were we? I realized I left the bottle."
Because he hadn't thrown it away, so he was in a panic about it.
Yeah, he hadn't thrown it away. No, the other thing you hear is that whenever he plays events, when he's paid an appearance fee, he goes to China, they say this guy will absolutely bend over backwards he totally gets it. And he's very popular among fans. He's popular among his colleagues, but he also sort of gets the business and the politics of tennis. And when someone pays you an appearance fee, they expect you to shake hands. I mean, this guy, we all talk about Federer's dignity. We don't need to compare. You can say nice things about player A without denigrating anyone.
No,
but
you
I
can't,
just think,
John. Not on
exactly.
social media. You
Right.
You can't say a nice thing about anyone without it being a direct offense to someone else.
It's so obvious you're a homer. Ask Lindsey Vonn. Ask Lindsey Vonn how that went. But no. I mean, from day one, I did a piece on Nadal before he won the French. This guy's never played the French before. It's 20 years ago too. We're talking about his body, his injuries, his career. This guy, for a guy we all thought was going to burn himself out, it was going to be an injury case. 20 years is a nice run, but he was great when he was 18 years old and sitting there in the playing lounge and making eye contact and didn't speak much English. And he's great today. He's the guy never changed. And I can't imagine an athlete, much less a tennis player, who's sort of more highly regarded. And you said it. It's not because he's glib and clever and witty on Twitter. He just has this level of common courtesy that has never deserted him, even as he has gone from a teenage prospect to a guy probably worth $1 billion.
Yeah, I used to think I would hear his press conferences and I would kind of roll my eyes because it would be, a pre-press deal at Roland Garros, and he's playing some guy who's 80 in the world who knows perfectly well that he's won, 87 matches in a row at Roland Garros. And he's like, well, the guy plays well. I don't know. Anything can happen today. I'm going, bullshit, man. You're going to win this match. And then time goes on, you get to know him a little bit better. And it's weird because, you feel like Roger and Novak kind of deal from a place of confidence, even when things aren't going well, right? Like they kind of deal from a place of, I've been here before, my skill set is better, I'm going to make you do it over time. Whereas I feel like Rafa, and it's really endearing because I operated the same way, just not nearly as well or not nearly as long, but kind of dealt from a place of insecurity, right? Okay, I've won certain types of matches 400 times in my career, and 401, I'm like, oh, it could all be different this time. And it's an endearing quality. I used to think it was 20% false humility, where it's like you're saying the right thing just because you don't want to be disrespectful. And then you get to know him and it's like, wait a minute, he hasn't missed that note in 15 years. That's a lot. That would be a lot of intent to present yourself a certain way. And then you see him behind the scenes and the way that he operated and the way that he treated people. And you go like, oh, okay, this guy is just who he is. And he is endearing, not because it's calculated or it's a talking point or it's, false humility. It's just because he is that way. He is that sort of human. And it was nice to see someone who is utterly dominant also be kind of scared of the next result. It made him relatable, especially to, someone like me who see these three guys as absolute superheroes. For me, he was the most relatable, because you could kind of see his struggle. You could see the inner dialogue. You could, when he told you, he was like, well, I don't know if I can win this year at Roland Garros. It's even money. It's like, dude, you've won it 13 times. Like, I'm going to go out on a limb. You're in with a shot, And so I've come to kind of know, respect, and I feel like get Rafa even more over time. And I said when I saw him for a quick 30 seconds, and it's as if no time had passed. He came over, gave a big hug. How are you? Are you happy? How old are your kids? I said, great. Congrats on your son. How is everything with you? He goes, I'm happy. I'm stressed. I don't know how this is going to end, but I'm generally settled and happy. And it was kind of that same tone. Nothing has changed. 1 Grand Slam or 22 Grand Slams, it's consistent. And that's kind of all you can ask of someone, right?
The Dubits. You'd always talk about Dubits. I always thought this was some Spanish currency. Then you realize he was saying doubts. And this was someone fueled by doubt. And sometimes, you're right. You'd say, oh, I'm playing Mike Hayden in the next round. I'm going to have to be 100%. He's a very, very talented player. If I'm not 100%.
Now we're just getting carried away because there's no fucking way I would be scared of playing Mike Hayden in anything that had to do with any general athleticism. Let's not get carried away. I couldn't set up a camera or audio, but that is a ridiculous comp, Jon Wertheim. You're losing credibility as a journalist.
Richard Gasquet is a very dangerous opponent. And when you look at the head-to-head record, he'd win like 2-2-2, and he'd come in and he'd have this dramatic sigh as though he just barely scored the knockout punch in the 10th round.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think so. This was a player fueled by doubts, and that you're right. I mean, it's a different. That's a real contrast to other players where Roger Federer did not have those sort of doubts, and it expressed itself not just in sort of the lines and the sandbagging and I'm lucky to win and I'm gonna have to be at my best, but also look at the way he practiced. I mean, he would have these 2.5 hour sessions. Federer would get out there and practice for 20 minutes. His feet would be on the service line.
Oh, there's nothing more frustrating than consistently losing to someone and then watching them practice and not actually be concerned with the form in practice. And this is a side tangent, but then be like, oh, it'll be there on Monday when it needed to be. Him and Pete Sampras, the only two people that I've seen that kind of have removed that stress mechanism. So annoying.
And Nadal's practicing before a French Open final that he's won double-digit times, and he's sweating and frustrated and staring at his strings. And then also, we look at 22 majors. This was one of the titans of the sport, but he lost a lot of close matches. I mean, you go back and you look, and sometimes you can see those doubts creep in. And that was something that sort of, to me, beyond the water bottles and some of the quotes in press conferences, you can see those doubts sometimes creeping in, whether it was the 2017 Australian Open final or some of those matches against Novak, or even just tough matches. He lost to Luca Pouille in the middle of the U.S. Open one year. I mean, you could see these doubts, and clearly this was something that gave him great motivation, and sometimes he was successful and was able to overcome them, and great things happened. And also, this is a guy who sometimes that little moment of hiccup, that little moment of self-doubt cost him matches. And I think he's a far more complex. Chris Clary, I hope I'm not giving anything up. I mean, Chris Clary is writing a book about Rafa after his wonderful book on Roger. And one thing that I fully expect is this is a really complex guy. And I think people sort of said, oh, he's the Spanish kid who wants to go fishing and play a little golf and life's good. There is a real level of complication to Nadal. And I think we're seeing a glimpse of that now as he, in real time, battles with how to end this glorious career of his.
And I sit here and we go back and forth, and I say things, I guess they come off as confidently. And I said, strong opinions loosely held. I'm going to tell you what I got wrong about Rafa way back when. Okay, I remember he wins his first French Open, and largely the RPMs and the height he's able to get on the ball, his physical gifts, but wasn't a complete player straight out of the gate, right? It was going to D up, was going to put the ball out of your strike zones, but you were going to get a hit on it. Okay, so the first time he wins the French Open, my old trainer, Doug Spreen, who I spent 250 nights with a year for a decade, he wins the first one, and he goes, this kid's going to win 8 French Opens. And I said, wait a minute, wait. Like, that's an unrealistic prediction. Like, that's a disservice to everyone else on earth. You're automatically just going to give this 17-year-old who at that point is serving 106, you're going to give him 8 French Opens, right? And I was right. He didn't win 8 French Opens. He won 14. But it's just amazing to see. And then also I was one of the dummies. So everyone's like, oh man, if we could just get healthy for the last 3 months. He's 37. I thought he would have a hard time getting to 28 with the way that he plays. So instead of, if we're real tennis fans, and I say that we should all choose to deal in gratitude for what he has given us, right? Like for the time that we have had him, which is frankly longer than any of us dummies thought that he would be able to last. Like him winning 2 Grand Slams 2 years ago, unbelievable thought. Same goes for Roger coming back. Like we're bummed he didn't get his proper goodbye. We had him till he was 40. Like this is an unbelievable thing. We still have Novak playing at a high level at 36 years old. This didn't happen back in the day. So instead of being sad about it, and that was my first reaction. We can choose to have gratitude for what he has given us, what he's given the sport, the stewards that these guys have been throughout their entire careers. I'm going to choose gratitude when looking back on Rafa. Whatever happens, if he doesn't play another sanctioned point for the rest of his life, I want to see that run. I want to see that 91 U.S. Open for him, like Jimmy Connors, right? I want to see that exit. If we don't get it, let's be thankful for what he's given the sport. I'm thankful to have been on the other side of it before, and I've never, ever felt a tennis ball in my life feel the way it feels when he ropes a forehand and it hits your racket and it kind of causes like a delay, like there's an impact. It doesn't shoot off. It is such an impossible decision to make on how to deal with him, especially if you're compromised on one side like I was, right? You know that he has that hook forehand that he can go out and away to your backhand where you're kind of going fishing. That was kind of the first weakness we ever saw in Roger Federer's game. And it was by virtue of this guy being left-handed and him being able to create a spin on the ball that we haven't seen before or since. There are players who hit it harder through the court. There are players that serve better. There are players that return better. No one can create the spin mechanism that this guy can. And it's hard for me to imagine. I know, records are made to be broken. The next iteration comes. This guy is so specifically special with his physicality, his strength, the spin he's able to put on the ball. And I'll just give you like a little microcosm of the decisions you have to make when you're playing him, right? So he whips that thing cross court and you're going, I'm already in a bad spot, right? I have to check left, maybe 2 or 3 feet to the left of the middle hash mark. And this was when you knew he was confident. And this is when you also knew on the other side that you were fucking screwed outside of your serve and quick points. Is when he was confident, he would hit that one up and away. It doesn't matter if it lands on the service line. It is checking off the court and it is above your head. If I hear one more commentator say, take that ball early, I'm going to automatically transport them back to 1976. Like, that's the dumbest thing I hear, and I want to throw things at the TV every time I hear it. So anyways, you check left, the ball's up and away. You somehow succeed and stick one cross court off of that ball. Now, you've succeeded. What does that get you? He's in the corner he wants to be in, and he's setting up. You have to take that left step, 2 or 3 shots left again. You have to guard the one cross court. And early in a match, if he has it. When he's not confident, he'll just keep you in that poison pattern, and that's going to work probably. He's going to win 60 or 65% of points there. But then it's like a cat playing with a dead mouse or something. You check left, and all of a sudden he holds it to the last minute. It looks like he's going to hit that ball cross court, and at the last moment he sends it line. And he hits a winner, and it is a winner by 14 feet, and you were not even close to it, and you feel like you did a good job handling the first one. It is an impossible decision to make. As he's progressed, Slice has gotten unbelievable, uses it to switch directions. The backhand pass cross court is probably the best backhand passing shot cross court that we've ever seen, especially on the run. His ability to mix up his serve. Obviously, he likes to go can opener with the left hand a lot, but also on big points, he would go flat the other way. Like, it was a constant guessing game. His second serve kicks into your body, moved it around the court, and his volleys, we keep saying they're underrated, but we've said it so much that they're probably just rated at this point. But the way that he's been able to progress as a player, where it used to be kind of D up and be physical, the way that he's come through, stepping in on returns at Wimbledon, just a master class in tennis IQ, and it is an absolutely debilitating day of decision making when he is in full flight. Hey, Jon, real quick before I let you go, we teased some Novak news last week. You keep mentioning this All-Star game situation. Like, what do you know that the rest of us don't?
Everybody wants a tennis all-star game, right? We have a skills competition, men, women, everything to celebrate our sport. Well, you know what a really good time to do that might be? Right before Indian Wells. Everybody's happy. They come to Southern California, and I've heard Novak has really taken an interest in this. This is not just, hey, we should have an all-star game. I mean, there is a logo somebody showed me. They're looking for venues. This would be in Los Angeles.
So he wants to kind of take ownership over. He wants to kind of take ownership over this all-star idea.
Yeah, and I think some of this is just, I mean, he's always looking for ways to involve players. This is a legacy play, but I also think this just makes smart business sense. Who wouldn't want to see Coco try to hit targets or have a sprint competition or have a who can serve the fastest? And Novak has taken a real interest in this, and I was told he's been looking at venues in Southern California. Again, there's even a logo. So this is not just some whimsical idea. I mean, he's really running with this. Look for this as early as 2025.
Interesting. I will say, like, I've always struggled with the concept of it just because I don't know how it would work. Like, I don't know that there's a lot of players that want to go, swing as hard as they can at serves on a given night with no other context, and your body's not warm and the whole thing. Skills competition has the potential to get awkward on TV. Like, if you don't hit something for a while, it's like the dunk contest now. It kind of just feels a little hollow. I'll tell you, I watched the tiebreak 10s the other night in Indian Wells. It was great. I loved it. I think that is the format. It's unisex. There's something on the line. People want to win. They're still hitting great shots, but there is some levity. Ben Shelton's hitting these knee breaker serves, and then there's an element of skill and ridiculousness of trying shots. I think that's its own thing. I was watching that the other night before I knew any of this Novak stuff. And I'm like, that's the All-Star game, right? You get selected, you get honored based on ranking and/or a hybrid of ranking and slam results. Maybe a couple wild card coaches' choices. Coach of the year maybe chooses the 4 replacement players as they see fit. But that tiebreak 10s format, I think, is it for All-Star Weekend. But Jon, thanks for the breaking news. You've been on a bit of a heater with your news breaking on the podcast. We appreciate having you, and that'd be great. Listen, we need an All-Star game. We're the only major sport that really doesn't have it. I hope it works out. That'd be cool. Thanks, Jon.
Yep. See you next week. See you guys.
So a couple of things I get asked a lot about different coaches I had and what, some did well and what some, what other people, and they ask, what makes Brad so special as a coach? And I said, okay, so there's a tonal awareness and there's an ability to recognize when to deliver the information where his player is ready to receive it, right? So, like, I know Andre would want to go on and you guys would have maybe a 4-hour conversation. He could be right off the court and you guys would settle in. I used to walk past you guys in locker rooms and you guys were like fully on one, like going after it. I didn't like doing that at the courts. I wanted to get in and get out. So you would approach dinner and you would say, okay, level with me here for 15 minutes. And you knew that you had my attention. I was calm. I was not in an emotional state. Where does that instinct come from? Is it something that's natural for you, or is it just a general awareness, something you have to think about? How does that manifest in such expertise?
I mean, it's a great question in coaching, and that you and Andre couldn't be further from, the spectrum. Same like with an Andy Murray. Before a match, maybe 15 seconds was all I was going to get with you. And one time, I remember one time you were playing Cyril Saulnier at Indy, and I didn't think the guy could hit a backhand down the line. The guy hit like 10 backhands in a row down the line. You started railing on me. But a couple times, you could be pretty brash before a match, and I wanted you to play a guy's forehand. Every once in a while, I'd tell you to play the backhand. Then you would tell me in the stands, see, you were wrong. It's about, understanding the player. Andre liked to talk a long period of time about matches and afterwards. You needed space, get in, get out. It's very similar to you about information is Coco. Coco, you can't go a long period of time. And she's a little bit like you, the Mission Impossible. This message will implode in 10 seconds. And so you have to understand that. And that's the cool thing about coaching. And I also feel like that I learned a lot from my coach, Tom Shivington, in that I don't have a philosophy. I don't feel like I take a player, and then some coaches feel like, okay, this is the type of player each time I want to mold them into. I'm always thinking about what maybe my player doesn't do that well. How are you going to manage that? And how are you going to maximize what you do well? And probably now, when you watch, I think the most important factor to being great is how do you manage that dip? Like Sampras could be playing awful and he could be at 4-all. How often have you seen Joker? You know what? He's not at his highest level, but he's still on serve. And all of a sudden, if you have a dip, he can bite you in the ass, in 11 minutes. That, to me, is the difference between being good and being great. How do you manage when you're not at your best, and how do you take advantage quickly?
Another thing that you are an absolute expert at is I see so many coaches, right? And I watch them operate and I hear what they're saying, and they're telling their player 11 different things during a practice, right? It's like your swing arc, your prep, your this, that, the footwork, you got to be at 90-degree angle, and it's like your head's going to explode. You are so good at focusing around 2 or 3 talking points at a time. You go in, there's a focus. You mentioned the first day at Queens, we're going to take a step back. That's going to free you up. And you say it with a confidence where even if I'm on the fence, there's still a belief system. Is that something that's intentional, or do you just feel like you have to kind of tackle one problem before you can actually commit to another one?
I feel like too many coaches in practice get too technical. Yep. I mean, I see it like every day. I'm on the court yesterday, and I'm amazed how many coaches are so technical during practice, and they feel like every swing you did something wrong. And I'm like, man, if you want to find something wrong, you will. But to me, it's not like the time to be doing that. And probably my all-time pet peeve, my coach, Tom Shivington's pet peeve, why do coaches stand so close to the player when he practices? Give him some space. You should be nowhere near the court when they're playing. You should never be standing. Andre would go nuts if like the coach was standing behind the player when he's serving. Just give some space, give some freedom. And a lot of times we're on limited time, like at these tournaments. So you're trying to maximize and think about, maybe some of the things that I might be saying is for the match tomorrow. Or maybe, maybe let's work on a couple of crosses here because maybe we can do that a little bit more tomorrow in the match situation. Because I think there's practice when you're off. That's a time to work on things. That's like you have a little grid or you have a long block getting ready for us. But when you're at the tournament, the tournament's not the time to be getting fit. If you're trying to get fit at the tournament, you're in the shitter. And we shouldn't be trying to make technical changes. Now you're just trying to get ready to have this ability to turn on tomorrow. And then tomorrow, the next day, how am I going to, fix my practice schedule to get ready for the match?
We probably have a lot of listeners who aren't, like your first coaching gig was with Andre Agassi, right? And then, you pick up with Coco. When we got together, we had a lot of runway to improve on, but I think I was 6th in the world when we started. Do these the way you approach that, and with the technical part of coaching, does that apply to all levels, or is it something that you can do because you're dealing with players of a certain level, like with the rec players and coaches that are coaching juniors? Is that still the same?
Totally the same, but you were 10, by the way.
I call bullshit on that for 20, by the way. I'll go back and have a research department.
Okay, you ever play backgammon?
No, but I know that I was 6th in the world.
I double the cube and say that you were 10.
You got it.
When I start coaching a player, let's say it's a pro, I try to think about whatever's happened before doesn't matter. And you don't compare one player to the next player. I started thinking, and I start looking through your lens, what can we do to start getting better? And it's only, in tennis, way too many players and coaches think about what we've missed and what's happened in the past. That's not helping you. What's helping you now is getting ready for what's upcoming. And probably, if I'm working with the club player, I start thinking about in the same terms. I feel like club players way more overestimate their weaknesses massively. Coco's physio, Maria, she's 40 years old. She's an Argentinian lady. She was playing a match yesterday, and she lost to another Argentinian physio in 7-6. And I was out there walking in the morning, and I gave her a couple tips. I said, you know what? If you play to your strengths, you beat that guy 6-2. There's no reason with your quickness that you're trying to pull triggers. You should be a pusher. You should, like, when the ball's high to your backhand, back up. Manage how you're playing. And a lot of club players do not understand. Screaming winner 1 point. It's the dummy errors that cost you the match. And believe me, all the way through the juniors in college, that stuff matters.
I am having fun and a chuckle here of you walking by and analyzing a battle royale of trainer versus trainer. And I had this flashback to when your son, Zach, and Dougie Spreen were in the indoor courts at Wimbledon just having absolute battles. And I'm coaching Doug and you're coaching Zach. We spent a million off days. You know, we would practice. I always like to practice on the carpet because I feel like it was a truer bounce than what you would get at the practice courts, and you wanted to get a little bit of rhythm. And I remember those afternoons where it was like the Zach versus Dougie showdown. We would be at home and be like, they'd kind of look at each other. We're a little bored, like, it's only 5-minute walk. You guys want to go over and battle? And they're like, yeah. And then we would each go. Like Brad's coaching his guy, and I'm coaching Spreedy.
But believe it or not, okay, you play now, you're at a club, and a lot of 3-0s and 3-5s want to be better. And they take lessons. But the simpleness in an actual match isn't about how you're hitting the forehand and how you're hitting the backhand. It's about shot selection. It's about making another ball. And if you're, let's say, a college player and you're a good mover, you're pulling trigger, maybe you don't need to. So it's always trying to find a solution. What will work best for your game? And that's kind of how I thought when I played. And if I was reborn, I never heard this word one time, Andy, which I heard from Andre, which didn't make sense to me because I couldn't compute it. Andre told me early on, this word that's a simple 4-letter word that didn't fucking compute to me. You know what it was? Peak. How am I going to be peaking in 7 weeks? And like me, I couldn't think, well, we got Miami. You know, and he wanted to know, like in Washington, it was about how am I going to be ready for the Open? And so like me, when I played, I was always focused on the week. So maybe I'm
in your camp.
And so maybe when I would get to the Open, I would be tired, you know, because I didn't understand how to do that. Because for me, every week was the Open. And I didn't think about winning a slam or peaking like that. So once he told me about that, it helped my brain understand, okay, it's not about Washington. And since even though I want to be playing well there, I want to be able to play at my best 7 weeks out. So that kind of instantly changed my brain from the player to the coach. And probably the most important transition that you'll make from a player to the coach is understanding it doesn't matter what I did. It only matters when I look through your lens or Andre's, now Coco's. That's what helps make them a better player. But a lot of former players look through their eyes and think about what they would do and then tell the player what they're, you know, how they see it through their own lens.
So you've obviously seen kind of and experienced everything through your own eyes, through your players' eyes. Who do you lean on now? If you have a question about, are you calling Andre and saying, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Who do you rap with about tennis still?
I text you. I text Andre a lot. I talk to Killer Cahill a lot.
Interesting.
And believe it, I still talk to my coach, who is 87 years old, Tom Shivington. And my kids, throughout their whole life, didn't even know his name was Tom. They just think his name is Coach. And I told Coach the only difference was he had to coach people like me. I got a chance to maybe coach a little better players. And when you coach a college team, it probably makes you a little more even keel because you have to learn to manage different levels.
Oh, interesting.
So when you coach different players, they have different levels. But the beauty of tennis, there's all this technology now, which I'm not that crazy about, to tell you the truth. And the lines...
Is that just because you don't know how to work an iPhone?
No, I know how to work it, but not amazing. And, you know, I still have... But I'll tell you this. Okay, when you get 300 pages of analytics, there's some great stuff in there. But there's also I call the analytics doesn't take the human factor into it, that your player maybe strength is different than the patterns of this one match they're going to come up. So all of a sudden I'm looking and I'm scouting a match. The girl is serving and doing everything that maybe tomorrow, when she's playing Coco, she's going to make an adjustment. If she doesn't, you're probably going to thump her. And I find that if I have 300 pages of analytics, doesn't your opponent have 300 pages of analytics? So you have to be careful. If I told you, Andy, it's verbatim. The guy's serving wide your backhand on every break point. He does it 93% of the time. And I feel like football coaches and a lot of tennis coaches hide behind this data. I'd much fucking rather be wrong than say that the data told me it's going to the backhand. Then what happens on the big point? They go to your forehand because they know that your forehand's weaker.
Yeah. So it's like, for example, my mind went to, okay, so if someone's trying to figure out where I'm serving and they're using a small enough sample size and the match that they happen to look at is me playing Feliciano Lopez, and then all of a sudden they draw down that, oh, well, Andy's serving wide 85% of the time. That's not actually like my serving pattern. It's just the serving pattern that I had inside of a given matchup, and you can't make that into gravity, right? You can't make that just factual day to day.
So let's say they'll do it over, 80 matches. 70 of those matches could have been one-sided, and you might have been able to been fine. The matches that are most important are the matches where you're playing at the same level as your peers, and what changes can you make? I know that one time I looked at data a long time ago when Andre played Pete in the 99 final of Wimbledon. He was averaging about 99 miles an hour on his second serve.
Yeah, and he pumps it up to 120 against Andre immediately.
Yeah. And so he knew Andre was playing really well there, and he was like, you know what? I'm not going to let him take some huge shots. And then all of a sudden, we weren't quite ready for that. And at 3-4, the match turned on a dime, 3-all, love 40, and he hit 2 second serve bombs.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and then Andre got rattled because he didn't break. But that's not going to be in the data. And great players probably have the ability to change data more than a guy ranked 80 or a girl ranked 150.
Yeah, and the thing that is true amongst all great players is they generally force you to up your risk profile. Like you're talking about Pete having to go bigger against Andre. I'm not hitting a little bunny kick against Roger because I don't want to get neutral. And so across all of the great players that you've ever seen, I would guess that the easiest kind of common drawdown is that Pete example where he knows Andre is playing. He can, he's not going to be able to manage his serve, right? He has to actually create something special and vice versa. I always had to adjust against Fed and do things I didn't want, come in on balls I didn't want, try to be aggressive on the backhand when I didn't want to, a little bit more up my risk profile on a second serve. I just think the greats across time, and maybe no one better than Novak, kind of forcing you into kind of upping your risk profile. And when I sit down and watch matches, I always get told what's happening, right? I always get told this person's missing this shot, this person's missing that shot. And I'm going, no, that person's missing that shot because they don't have the choice to play their standard boxed in game, right? You're playing someone 40 versus Novak. Something's got to give. They're not going to beat him with their kind of stock offering, right?
So the greatness of Novak. So Fed's game has all this electricity and he has shots and everything. Same with Rafa.
Yep.
Take Novak. He's the greatest player ever at the neutral ball. It's not sexy. It's effective. And it forces you into making a decision that maybe you don't want, or maybe I'm not willing to play this 20-ball rally. And he wins a lot of points by not taking a risk. He's not hitting the ball inside the service box, but he's hitting a good, hard, quality shot. And I think that's the biggest change that I made with Andre, is that Andre would go too big. Mm-hmm. He would risk too much on the first ball, and then he would litter up a stat sheet. And I'm like, you're not the type of player that should be littering up a stat sheet. I said, if you play a match and you can hit less than 10 unforced errors, Nobody's going to
You're
beat
not
you.
losing. Yeah.
Unless somebody plays a great match. But when you play 40 winners, 40 unforced errors, you know who was an unbelievable player to litter up a stat sheet? He wasn't a fast guy, but that's probably the best way he could play against good players was Robin Soderling.
Oh, man, he could thump it. Yeah, it's like he was most effective by kind of having peaks and valleys, right?
Enquist, another Swede like that.
Yeah.
So when you're a great ball striker, there's no reason that you need to litter up a stat sheet. At least let the match come to you and see if you need to all of a sudden up what you're doing because your opponent's asking you to do that.
Now, we've kind of touched on Andre. I want to take a quick second. Obviously, Murray's in that kind of news a little bit because he says he's going to play through the summer. We don't know what that looks like. We don't know if that's British summer. We don't know if he's going to try to make it through the Open. Talk me through kind of his personality pre and post match. We're talking about kind of dialing things back, right? Like letting your kind of stock game be effective on the other person, not overplaying. He's someone that even when you started with him was never guilty of overplaying any shots. So what were the adjustments that you had to make with him? I'm assuming they were different than with Andre.
It's funny, it's the first morning I got here. Let's say, so it was last Sunday, 4:15 in the morning in the gym. Who do I see? Andy Murray. And we get into the longest conversation about rackets and all of the technology. Oh my God, he's crazy about all this. With Andy, probably the biggest thing is that I analyzed right away was the type of game that he played. First, the beauty of it was that everybody told me, like, he'll never be top 10. He'll never be this. He's a pusher.
That's so stupid from anyone who actually knows tennis, though. The guy, he has such ball control. I mean, you have that kind of ball control. You can't teach that. I disregard that opinion, even back when I first saw him.
Yeah. So, but he at that point probably weighed $160.
Yeah.
And his biggest issue was physicality. He literally at 2-hour mark was toast. I mean, he didn't have, and the type of game that he played, you need a full tank. You can't be a counterpuncher unless you're fitter than a fiddle, unless you can stay out there and you can wear your opponent down. So I did think that was the most important thing. And then I felt like probably more than Andy shot, and it's probably the one shot he probably wishes was a little bit better, was the second serve. I felt like his second serve was a little bit attackable. And then the other shot that we talked about a lot, Andy is a 3-letter guy. No matter what you tell him, he's going to say why. What's your research? What's your thought? I'm telling you, there wasn't one time I could tell you or I could tell Andre. Anytime I told Andy Murray something, it was why. How did you come to this? And a lot of times, I see it, I think it. I don't, disseminate like you do. And I spend 10 hours on the computer thinking about, and I don't have this dissertation. I just say it. I didn't understand why he would jump 8 feet inside the court and then bunt the return. So I say, I don't get the geometry that you're going to take this big risk and then not do something. Because then if you don't do something, now you're not in great position to where you can defend on the next ball.
Yeah,
but he was a unique guy talking about strategy with.
Yeah, he would. We got into a cadence a couple of years ago when he's the only guy I've ever seen that. This is a true story, producer Mike. We're texting back and forth, and again, you mentioned the rackets. He was on one about the rackets 2.5, 3 years ago, right? And he would text. He had me and Bob Bryan on a text, and he was like, "What do you think? More space?" I'm like, I don't know. He rented out a court and kept the shot spot live and active so that when he was using different rackets, it wasn't based on feelings like Brad's talking about. It was based on an entire readout shot profile. He rented out a court with shot spot technology after he had lost in Cincinnati one year, and then sends us all the readouts. I'm like, bro, I don't know. Like, your math is great. I have no idea. I would have to see how the ball was coming off or feel it. Like, I don't know what this is.
Is this like sad? He told me at the LTA, he has a radar gun. He just play tested every single racket.
This stuff so much.
And he says that he, that all the different head rackets, some are more powerful. he couldn't get any more power on any racket, on any different types, looser, tighter. And I said, maybe it has something to do with your arm. Maybe you've got a little too much. But he's still searching.
I know.
For any smidge that can make him better. And that's the reason why he's probably still going, because in the back of his mind, that if he finds something, it will all of a sudden give him that pixie dust.
And he's going to, he's been holding out the whole time because he wants to make a quarter of a slam and feel those kind of emotions again. And I hope he has that moment. I hope he gets the send-off that he wants, because he's deserved it. And his curiosity is amazing. I'm sure it was probably annoying for you as a coach sometimes, but I respect someone who is so committed to process, right? That is a non-negotiable with someone's great, is respecting the process, not trying to shortchange the process. Some of us can go overboard sometimes, but it is a non-negotiable, especially in an individual sport. Well, I personally loved being able to pick Brad Gilbert's brain. It's weird. I feel like I'm equal parts host and fan of tennis minds. And so for me to be able to sit here and kind of play both sides of it is a real pleasure for me. What I will say is that being wrong never really affects Brad's confidence, right? So we made a bet where he said, when we got together, I said kind of casually, when we got together, I was, it was 2003, it was like late May, early June, and I was 6th in the world. He goes, no, buddy, I'm telling the whole BG thing. And he said, you were 10. And he said it with a confidence where I was like, I might be wrong. I wasn't wrong. I was 6. Pay the man, Brad. Pay the man. I'll send you an invoice. I probably won't send you an invoice because you came on our pod this week. But anyways, point being, I won that bet. Just let the record show. Next week, we are going to have my dear friend, James Blake, famous for his huge forehand. Maybe this picture where he's on Arthur Ashe Stadium court pouring water on himself, shirtless. For those listening, that's probably a weird thing, but there is a picture for people watching on YouTube and/or, I guess, YouTube. And also, let's just enjoy Indian Wells the rest of the week. The tournament's gotten off to a hell of a start. I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I appreciate you all listening. This has been served. We'll see you next Sunday on T2, and we'll see you every Tuesday for the audio and YouTube release. Thanks.